In my last video, I introduced the enemy. In order to understand religion in this world, you need to understand him because he created all the confusion. He needed to be discussed because of where the rest of the story goes. This next subject, King Solomon, is in the middle of the pack because while he is a great testament to Elohim and Israel in the beginning of his story, in the end of his story, Satan uses his mistakes a great deal to create doctrine for his story. If you do research on your own on this subject, you must be very careful because there's pure wickedness surrounding it and can be a stumbling block for those not fully grounded in their faith. But if it's not covered and understood, it can be a cause for loss of faith if you come across the enemy side. So I've been praying for guidance from the Holy Spirit to communicate this to you, that it fills you with understanding and removes confusion. Let's begin. Before part 5, we left off with Solomon becoming the next king of Israel after his father, King David. David secured a peaceful situation for Solomon. He defeated all of Israel's enemies so that when Solomon came to the throne, there was no one left to fight. This was also why David was not able to build a temple. He told Solomon, "My son, it was in my mind to build a house unto Elohim. But Elohim came to me and said, You have shed blood abundantly, and made great wars. You shall not build a house unto my name. You have shed much blood upon the earth in my sight. A son shall be born to you, who shall be a man of rest. I will give him rest from all his enemies round about. For his name shall be Solomon. And I will give peace and quietness unto Israel in his days. He shall build a house for my name, and he shall be my son, and I will be his father, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom over Israel forever. So my son, I have prepared for the house of the Lord 100,000 talents of gold, and 1,000 talents of silver, and of brass and iron without weight, for it is an abundance. Timber also and stone have I prepared." Then David gave Solomon the plans for the temple that he had by the Spirit. The temple was to be a house for Elohim, a holy place in which the Ark of the Covenant would be held, and where burnt offerings would be done. Like he told Solomon, David made preparations for the temple before his death. He gathered the strangers that were in the land of Israel, but not actually of Israel. He had them gather stones to build the house. He prepared iron for the nails, and brass and cedar trees in the abundance. David took care of much of the preparations, being wise in knowing that Solomon was young and inexperienced. And the house that was to be built for Elohim must be exceedingly magnificent, of fame of glory throughout all countries. So he did much of the beginning groundwork. David was a good king. His reign over Israel was for a total of 40 years. From this, Solomon's kingdom was firmly established. So Solomon was now king. Elohim appeared to Solomon in a dream by night. Elohim asked Solomon, "What shall I give you?" Solomon told Elohim, "You've shown great mercy to your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in truth, and in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart with you. You have continued this great kindness for him, and you have given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. Now, Elohim, you have made your servant king instead of my father David, but I am a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in, and your servant is in the midst of your people whom you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to be numbered or counted. Therefore, give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours?" This pleased Elohim. He told Solomon, "Because you have asked this thing, and have not asked long life for yourself, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have asked for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern justice, behold, I have done according to your words. See, I have given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has not been anyone like you before, nor shall any like you arise after you. And I have also given you what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be anyone like you among the kings all your days. So if you walk in my ways, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days." So Solomon became the wisest king on earth. An example of his wisdom was when 2 women appeared before him, each carrying a child, one living, the other dead. One woman accused the other woman of stealing her child after hers died, and the other denied doing so. Solomon, in his wisdom, ordered the living child to be cut in halves with the sword, to be equally given to both women. The problem solved itself, as a mother that accused the woman of taking her child said, "No, just let her keep the living child. Do not slay it." And the accused woman said, "That's fine. Divide it." Solomon gave the child to the right mother, who actually cared. All of Israel heard of the judgment that Solomon had judged, and they feared him because they saw Elohim's wisdom was in him to do judgment. Solomon reigned over all of Israel. In the 4th year of his reign as king, he began the work of building the temple as a house for Elohim. Chapters 5, 6, and 7 of 1 Kings describes this in detail. Solomon selected over 150,000 men to do work for the building of the temple. He sent word to Hiram, king of Tyre. He said, "As you have dealt with David, my father, and sent him cedars to build himself a house to dwell in, so deal with me. Behold, I am building a temple for Elohim to dedicate it to him. And the temple which I build will be great, for Elohim is greater than all gods. Therefore, send me at once a man skillful to work in gold and silver, and bronze and iron, and purple and crimson and blue, who has skill to engrave with the skillful men who are with me in Judah and Jerusalem, who David, my father, provided." Huram answered back in writing, saying, "Because Elohim loves his people, he has made you king over them. Blessed be Elohim, who made heaven and earth, for he has given King David a wise son, endowed with prudence and understanding, who will build a temple for Elohim and a royal house for himself. And now I have sent a skillful man endowed with understanding, Hiram, my master craftsman, the son of a woman of the daughters of Dan, and his father was a man of Tyre, skilled to work in gold and silver, bronze and iron, stone and wood, purple and blue, fine linen and crimson, and to make any engraving and to accomplish any plan which may be given to him, with your skillful men and with the skillful men of David your father." The man he sent was Hiram Abith. He was a master mason, and his story is a central core and inspiration for Freemasonry. I will get into it later in the video. But the building of the temple was massive. You can read about how glorious it was in 2 Chronicles chapter 3. At the end of construction, Solomon assembled the leaders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes in Jerusalem, and they brought the Ark of the Covenant from the city of David to the temple. The Levites brought up the Ark and all the holy furnishings. Then all the congregation of Israel who were there did the sacrifices of sheep and oxen and a great multitude. The priests brought the Ark of the Covenant to its place in the inner sanctuary of the temple to the most holy place. When Solomon finished praying, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and sacrifices, and the glory of Elohim filled the temple. When all the children of Israel saw how the fire came down and saw the glory of Elohim in the temple, they bowed their faces to the ground on the pavement and worshipped and praised Elohim, all saying, "For he is good, and his mercy endures forever." It took 20 years, but Solomon finished the house of Elohim and successfully accomplished all that came into his heart. This was a remarkable accomplishment, and just reading this you can feel the Holy Spirit leaping for joy in your heart. It's truly remarkable. You can read it for yourself in 2 Chronicles chapters 5 through 8. So Solomon is now older, and from this temple he built an astonishment for the rest of the world. Solomon surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. All the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which Elohim had put in his heart. Remember, Elohim promised this. Solomon made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones. He had a massive amount of gold items. He was truly a splendor. So it was at this time of his splendor where he made his mistakes. His biggest mistake was he loved women. Any man listening to this should learn from Solomon. He loved many foreign women, one of them including the daughter of the Pharaoh of Egypt. Earlier, he made a treaty with the Pharaoh of Egypt and married the Pharaoh's daughter. He was not supposed to do this. He didn't need a treaty. Elohim was to be Israel's protection. He would fight for them. But as his status of splendor grew, he took on more wives and concubines, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, the Sidonians, and the Hittites. He took wives from these nations of whom Elohim had said to the children of Israel, "You shall not go into them, and neither shall they come into you. For surely they will turn your heart after their gods." But Solomon's flesh was weak. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. These wives turned Solomon's heart away from Elohim. His heart was not loyal to Elohim as was the heart of his father David. He went after the gods and goddesses of these other nations, like Ashtoreth of the Sidonians. Ashtoreth was the name of the moon goddess of the Sidonians or Phoenicians. Don't forget about the pagan structure, in case you didn't understand who Ashtoreth was every time you heard Israel turn to her and Baal. So anyway, Solomon did evil on the side of Elohim. He built high places to worship Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and to Molech, the abomination of the people of Ammon. He did this other times for all his wives, who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods. So Elohim told Solomon, "Because you have done this, and have not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. Nevertheless, I will not do it in your days, for the sake of your father. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear away the whole kingdom. I will give one tribe to your son for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." Elohim then raised up adversity against Solomon, and this is the end of the story for Solomon. He reigned over Israel for 40 years, and in his end, the kingdom of Israel fell apart. The Bible doesn't really speak in depth about the last years of Solomon. You can read and learn from his wisdom in the book of Proverbs. The book of Ecclesiastes is said to be written by him. It is a book that speaks on his remorsefulness and desire to be right with Elohim again. It was said to be written towards the end of his life. His story is not a happy ending. With Solomon's death, expired the glory and power of ancient Israel. And though the scriptures do not go in depth on his level of disobedience and wickedness, it can be inferred that he did a great deal of wickedness based on how the enemy has tried to use him for his doctrine to build his kingdom. This is known specifically through Freemasonry and the occult. The occult world highly references King Solomon. I'm not claiming their beliefs as true or not, but I think it's important to understand the other side. Like I said in part 5, know your enemy. The occult world refers to Solomon as a skilled sorcerer. It's not that he only tolerated paganism, but also participated in it. According to one of the many legends about him, Solomon used pagan magic to imprison 72 rebellious evil kings in a brass vessel, throwing them into a lake where they were supposed to stay until the end of time. The legend also says that in an attempt to find great treasure, the Babylonians rescued the vessel and broke it open, allowing the demons to escape. These demons became known as the 72 spirits of Solomon. Among the Eastern nations is again esteemed as a great magician who had great power over the spirit world. It was said he gained this power from Satan, who gave him a ring of power with a symbol on the ring. This symbol is known as the Seal of Solomon, also known as the Star of David. The Seal of Solomon is a hexagram and hides complex meanings, but it is a symbol used highly in witchcraft. The symbol was supposedly used on Solomon's ring and gave him the power to understand and communicate with animals, and to conjure up spirits to do his bidding. Kabbalists and alchemists are very fond of this symbol. It is also hidden on the US dollar. The way it is used today to represent the nation of Israel is very occultic in nature. It is not a symbol of Elohim. In reference to Freemasonry, according to the Freemason dictionary, the Temple of Solomon plays a very important part. It is said in Freemasonry that Solomon, Huram, king of Tyre, and Hiram Abith presided as Grand Masters over the lodges which they established. It's said their symbolic degrees were instituted and their systems of initiation were invented, and from that period to the present, Freemasonry has passed them down. It's said that almost all of symbolism of Freemasonry rests upon or is derived from the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. Each Masonic lodge is and must be a symbol of the Jewish temple. Each master in the chair represents King Solomon, and every Freemason is a personation of the Jews who worked on this temple. That's why I did part 5 of this series before introducing this subject. It's important to understand that Satan wants to be like Elohim, so he must use the things of Elohim, but pervert them. This is why there will be an Antichrist. I hope it starts connecting that Satan's primary goal is to pervert the things of Elohim. He's not just making up his own doctrine, but it must be a perversion of Elohim's. This is why the building of the third temple is so important to this new occult age. This is the goal of Freemasonry, and the events transpiring today are being orchestrated by these men within this structure of power. Freemasonry is not just an organization, it is a religion. But I will get into that later in more detail. The point of this knowledge is that from Solomon's mistake, the glory of ancient Israel went downhill, and Lucifer used Solomon's disobedience in creating and establishing his doctrine for future worship of him by his own name. Freemasonry and the occult all use Solomon as a symbol for their rebellion, particularly because of how great and important Solomon was. There is much confusion around Solomon, and my hope is that this part in the series answers some questions. This history is very important to understand. In the last part of the series, part 65, we spoke about the difference between the Jesus of the Quran and the Jesus, Yeshua, of the Bible. We saw clearly that the Jesus that the Quran speaks of was not the Yeshua HaMashiach of the Holy Bible. We see that they were only similar by name, but nothing else. And that's where much of the confusion occurs within Islam, when they believe that they are worshiping the same God. It's a part of understanding that needs to be understood when trying to comprehend these religious distractions. But Islam needs to be understood in order to understand much of the events that take place in history after it. From part 2 through part 57 of this series, we went through the scriptures in order to gain a foundation of the truth. But as we continue to go into history, we see less of the truth and more smoke and mirrors. We see the enemy strong at work through the centuries, working in men to help fulfill his goal and bring us to the exact point in time we are at today. Do you remember what Satan's goal is? It's to be like the Most High. And he has been working through men over the many centuries through secret societies, monarchs, and false religious structures to achieve this very goal. This is why there are secret societies, and his goal of being like the Most High is the major secret of their societies. Now, this subject that we will cover in this video is an important one. It took a while to make this video, because initially my plan was to go into explaining Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses, but the Father stopped me in the middle and showed me that I was rushing, and other things needed to be exposed and brought to the light first. There are so many people today that talk about the Illuminati, the New World Order, the sellouts, and the global elite, and that's a good thing, because it shows that many are waking up. But the truth is, it is hard to understand this matrix by just understanding the present day, or even the last 100 to 150 years. In order to have a solid grasp on all of these conspiracies and understand the plans and devices of the wicked, we have to go further back in history. These plans to establish Satan as the God worshipped by all, for him to try to realize his goal of being like the Most High, they did not just come about in the last couple of centuries. This New World Order has been orchestrated in secret over many centuries through many groups, organizations, monarchs, and families. We are just at the climax of all those plots and schemes. The thing is that you cannot have a solid grasp on these plots and schemes without going back in history to the many holders of these secrets and plots. A good place to start is with the Knights Templar. Have you heard of them? Maybe or maybe not, but much of the wicked influence of today can be traced directly back to the Templars and the groups surrounding and intertwined with them. But many of us do not know much about them. We should though, so I'm going to try to break them down to you. Ephesians chapter 5 verse 11 says, "And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them." So I'm going to do just that right now. Let's begin. Okay, so it's really hard to break this group down in one video, but I do not want to devote 2 videos to them, so I'll be condensing a lot of information. I have a lot of books on this subject, but for this video, I will be using a lot of information from the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail. They've done a massive amount of research and compiled it together, but the researchers are not on Yeshua's side. This is a good book to read if you have a solid foundation in the truth. This book is about the coming Antichrist side and his lie, and the Templars are a part of the foundation of this story. Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code pulls a lot from this book. Anyone that attempts to say they know who the Antichrist is, I mean the ones that say Barack Obama and the Pope are the Antichrist, but they do not use any of the information from this book in their analysis, they are often very wrong. But I digress. The Templars are a subject that should be understood. It all goes back to when Islam begins gaining dominance in the Middle East. The Arab followers of the new religion of Islam declared a jihad, a holy Islamic war, against the Byzantine Empire. Just for some background, in the year 395, the Roman Empire was formally divided into the Western Empire, ruled from Rome, and an Eastern Empire, ruled from Constantinople. This Eastern Empire will be known by historians as the Byzantine Empire. In the year 622, Muhammad began to unite the Arab tribes into a powerful fighting force through his preaching of Islam. His most important act during his early years in Medina was to pass down a revelation giving permission to his followers to go to war against those identified as their enemies. According to Muslim scholars, this concept of jihad, or holy war, can legitimately be applied against injustice and oppression, or against the rejectors of what they feel is the truth of Islam. By the time of Muhammad's death in 632, he had unified the Arabs under the banner of Islam, a religion, as well as social, legal, and political institution, and they now had a justification in the name of their God for war and conquest. So like I was saying, the Muslims declared a jihad against the Byzantine Empire. In 636 AD, the army of Umar invaded Palestine, and by the summer of the following year, the army was encamped outside the walls of Jerusalem. In February of 638, after a 7-month siege, the Christians were forced to surrender to the Caliph Umar, the Muslim commander. Umar then goes to the Temple Mount called the Haram al-Sharif by the Muslims, the noble sanctuary, where his purpose was to search for relics, among them what he called the Mihrab, or prayer niche of David, which Umar heard the Prophet Muhammad speak of. Umar also had a temporary mosque built at the southern end of the mount, on the spot where the Al-Aqsa Mosque stands today. They started building the Al-Aqsa Mosque 60 years later. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third most holy site in Islam. It should not be confused with the Dome of the Rock, that is also in Jerusalem, which is the most famous Islamic site in Jerusalem. It is not a mosque, but a holy shrine for Muslims. Muslims believe the Dome of the Rock to be where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven on his night journey. It was completed around the year 691. A note for all Bible deniers: if Jerusalem wasn't such an important place, none of this history that we are speaking about would have taken place there. Now, following the Arab conquest of Jerusalem in the year 638, the city's largely Catholic history likes to generalize it and say Christian, which has been a part of the major confusion surrounding the faith. Anyways, the Catholic population enjoyed a long period of good relations with the Muslims, but by the 10th century, the Muslims had become more aggressive. Starting in the year 1004, the Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim, who ruled over Egypt, North Africa, Palestine, and southern Syria, launched a campaign of anti-Christian fanaticism. By 1014, over 30,000 churches had been destroyed, and many Catholics were forced to convert to Islam. But the critical turning point in Western attitudes towards the Muslims came in 1009. This is when al-Hakim ordered for the complete destruction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. After al-Hakim died, his successor allowed the Byzantine emperor to rebuild the church, and Catholics again started to make their trips to Jerusalem. But the rise of the Muslims was too much for the Roman Catholic Church. In the year 1095, Pope Urban convened the Council of Clermont in central France. He told listeners that the Muslims were advancing into the heart of Christian lands, mistreating the population and desecrating their shrines and churches. He told them that the emperor of the Byzantine Empire had called for help, and it was the duty of the West to respond. He emphasized the special holiness of Jerusalem and told how pilgrims had suffered on their journeys there. He then made a great appeal to let the West go and rescue the East. He said that the nobility should stop fighting one another and instead fight a righteous war, and on top of that, he said that for those who died in battle, there would be a remission of sins. Let me just say that this is ridiculous, and exactly a big reason of how and why the truth in Yeshua is condemned by the world. Because man has placed themselves as authority, then condones war, then feels that they can forgive soldiers for the war they contributed in if they die. It's ultimate control. Anyways, this was the start of the First Crusade. You've heard of the First Crusade. This is a subject that is not taught much in our school history class. In the year 1099, the Crusaders, which consisted of about 1,200 knights. Now, this was not the Knights Templar. They did not exist yet in this crusade. The Templars fought in the second. But yeah, 1,200 knights and 15,000 men took back Jerusalem. And after this condensed history, this is where we begin to meet the Knights Templar. The formation of the Templars is said to start from the insecurity on the roads where there was murder, rape, enslavement, and robbery of unarmed pilgrims to Jerusalem. A group of 9 French knights had proposed to the Patriarch of Jerusalem at the time, and King Baldwin II, that for the salvation of their souls, they would form a community or withdraw to a life in a monastery. But Baldwin persuaded them to save their souls by protecting pilgrims on the road, and they should take a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience. On Christmas Day of the year 1118, those 9 knights took their vows before the Patriarch in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, calling themselves in Latin the Pauperes Comiton Christi, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ. Their declared objective was, as far as their strength permitted, they should keep the roads and highways safe, with a special regard for the protection of pilgrims. King Baldwin II gave the Al-Aqsa Mosque to the poor fellow soldiers, and they made it their headquarters. But here's the deal. First off, there is no record of them actually defending the pilgrims on the road, and King Baldwin did have a royal historian under his command. His name was Fulk de Schatz, but there's no record of the Templars' early activities in his 50 years of writing. In fact, there's only one writer about the beginning of the Templars, and that's Guillaume of Tyre. He wrote about them sometime in 1175 and 1185, so he was not a first-hand witness of their beginnings, but he is the only source we can gain info about their beginnings. He writes that in their first 9 years, they did not allow new membership. It was just the 9 of them. And it of course becomes suspicious when you try to understand how only 9 knights could protect all the roads for the traveling pilgrims and not recruit members to assist them. This beginning history makes no sense, and not much is known. The main rumor is that during those 9 years, they found something under Solomon's temple. Many people claim it was the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail, but no one knows for sure. Whatever it was said to give them enormous power, only second to the Pope, and they were known as Templars because of them working at Solomon's temple. Within a decade from their beginning, the Templars' fame seemed to have spread back to Europe. By 1128, a tract praising their virtues and qualities was issued by St. Bernard. St. Bernard at the time was the chief spokesman of the Christian world. He said, in praise of the new knighthood, he declares the Templars to be the epitome and apotheosis of Christian values. By 1127, most of the 9 knights returned to Europe from Jerusalem. In January of 1128, a church council was convened at Troyes, and at this council, the Templars were officially recognized and incorporated as a religious military order. Hughes de Payenne was given the title of Grand Master. He and his subordinates were to be warrior monks, soldier mystics, a militia of Christ, Christ's soldiers. The Templars were sworn to poverty, chastity, and obedience. They were obliged to cut their hair, but forbidden to cut their beards, and that distinguished themselves during a time when most men were clean-shaven. All members of the order were required to wear habits of surcoats and cloaks, and these soon evolved into the distinctive white clothing for which the Templars became famous for. Their behavior on the battlefield was strictly controlled too. For example, if one were captured, Templars were not allowed to ask for mercy or to ransom themselves. They were compelled to fight to the death. They were not permitted to retreat from battle unless the odds against them exceeded 3 to 1. In the year 1139, a papal bull was issued by Pope Innocent II. According to this bull, the Templars owned allegiance to no secular or ecclesiastical power other than the Pope himself. In other words, they were made totally independent of all kings, princes, and of all interference from both political and religious authorities. They had become a law unto themselves, an autonomous international empire, only to answer to the Pope, as I once said. Throughout Europe, younger sons of noble families flocked to enroll in the order's ranks, and vast donations in money, goods, and land were made from every quarter of the Christian world. Hughes de Payenne, the first Grand Master of the Templars, donated his own properties, and all new recruits were obliged to do likewise. On admission to the order, a man was compelled to sign over all his possessions. Within a mere 12 months of the Council of Troyes, the order held substantial estates in France, England, Scotland, Flanders, Spain, and Portugal. Within another decade, it also held territory in Italy, Austria, Germany, Hungary, the Holy Land, and points east. Although individual knights were bound to their vow of poverty, this did not prevent the order from amassing wealth, and on an unprecedented scale. All gifts were welcomed. At the same time, the order was forbidden to dispose of anything, not even to ransom its leaders. The temple received in abundance, but as a matter of strict policy, it never gave. During the next 100 years, the Templars became a power with international influence. They were constantly engaged in high-level diplomacy among nobles and monarchs throughout the Western world and the Holy Land. Close links were forged with the Muslim world as well, like with the Assassins, their Muslim counterpart. The assassins are actually claimed to be started by the Templars as well. The Templars' interests extended beyond war, diplomacy, and political intrigue, though. In effect, they created and established the institution of modern banking we know today. By lending vast sums to destitute monarchs, they became the bankers for every throne in Europe, and for certain Muslim potentates as well. With their network of common houses throughout Europe and the Middle East, they also organized, at modest interest rates, the safe and efficient transfer of money for merchant traders, a class that became increasingly dependent upon them. Money deposited in one city, for example, could be claimed and withdrawn in another city by means of promissory notes inscribed in intricate codes. The Templars thus became the primary money changers of the age, and the Paris common houses of the Templars became the center of European finance. They enjoyed a strong monopoly on the best and most advanced technology of their age, the best that could be produced by armorers, leatherworkers, stonemasons, military architects, and engineers. They contributed to the development of surveying, map-making, road building, and navigation. They possessed their own seaports, shipyards, and fleet, a fleet both commercial and military, which was among the first to use the magnetic compass. So needless to say, they had amassed a great deal of power. By the year 1306, King Philip IV of France was extremely anxious to rid his territory of the Templars. They were much stronger and better organized than he could ever be. They were firmly established throughout France, and by this time, even their allegiance to the Pope was only nominal. Philip had no control over the order, and he also owed them money. Philip first had to enlist the cooperation of the Pope, who the Templars owed allegiance and obedience. Between 1303 and 1305, the French king and his ministers engineered the kidnapping and death of one pope, Pope Boniface VIII, and quite possibly the murder by poison of another, Pope Benedict XI. Then, in 1305, Philip managed to secure the election of his own candidate, the Archbishop of Bordeaux, to the vacant papal throne. The new pontiff took the name Pope Clement V. Indebted as he was to Philip's influence, he could hardly refuse the king's demands, and these demands included the eventual suppression of the Knights Templar. Philip planned his moves carefully. A list of charges was compiled, partly from the king's spies who had infiltrated the order, partly from the voluntary confession of alleged renegade Templar. He issued and sealed secret orders to his stewards throughout the country. These orders were to be opened everywhere simultaneously and implemented at once. At dawn, on Friday, October the 13th, the year 1307, all Templars in France were to be seized and placed under arrest by the king's men, their common houses placed under royal sequestration, their goods were confiscated. And this is where we get the famous Friday the 13th from. Whether the Templars were warned in advance or whether they deduced what was in the wind, certain precautions were definitely taken. The knights who were captured seemed to have submit passively, as if they were under instruction to do so. There is persuasive evidence of some sort of organized flight by a particular group of knights, virtually all of whom were in some way connected with the order's treasurer. So it's not surprising that the treasure of the temple, together with almost all his documents and records, should have disappeared. Now, the Templars were said to be devil worshippers. They worshipped an idol called the Baphomet. At their secret ceremonies, they supposedly prostrated themselves before a bearded male head, which spoke to them and invested them with occult powers. Unauthorized witnesses of these ceremonies were never seen again, and there were other charges as well, which were even more vague. Accusations of infanticide, killing a child within a year of birth, or teaching women how to abort, also of obscene kisses at the abduction of their new candidates, and also accusations of homosexuality. Their biggest accusation was that these Christian knights ritually denied Christ, and they trampled and spit on the cross. In the year 1312, the Templars were officially dissolved. In March 1314, Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, was burned to death over a slow fire. With his execution, along with others, the Templars apparently vanished from the stage of history. But the order did not cease to exist, given the number of knights who escaped, who remained at large, or who were even acquitted. The papal bulls that King Philip sent, dissolving the order, was never proclaimed in Scotland, and therefore the order was never technically dissolved in Scotland. Many English and French Templars found a Scottish refuge. This is important to know. In Portugal, the order was cleared by an inquiry, and simply modified its names, becoming the Knights of Christ. Ships of the Knights of Christ sailed under the familiar red patty cross, and it was under the same cross that Christopher Columbus's 3 caravels crossed the Atlantic to the New World. Columbus himself was married to the daughter of a former Knight of Christ, and had access to his father-in-law's charts and diaries. Interesting, right? The Templars were presented in history as Christian soldiers who fought for the glory of Christ, but there was a dark side to them that was done in secret. They were sorcerers and magicians and alchemists. Many of the people that lived during their time shunned them, believing them to be in league with unclean powers. They were the beginning of the known black magic-based organizations that were brought to the light. They were also known to be guardians of the Holy Grail, which is very important to know, but we won't go in depth about the Holy Grail in this video. So with all this history, What is the significance of the Templars? They obviously are not a religion, so why am I speaking about them in this series? You see, the Templars are the beginning to what we know as secret societies. Now, I'm not saying that secret societies did not exist before the Templars, because that is not true. We have the Cathars, the Priory of Sion, and others. But the Templars are the most known, and they are the spark of the many secret societies that came about after they were set to dissolve. Remember how I said they were never dissolved in Scotland? Where do you think Scottish Rite Freemasonry comes from? You see, many Freemasons claim the Templars as their predecessors. Certain Masonic rites or observances claim direct lineal descent from the Templar order, as well as authorized custody of its arcane secrets. Certain Masonic lodges have adopted the grade of Templar, as well as rituals and names and titles supposedly descended from the original order. The global banking dynasties, the elite families of the ages, all take upon certain characteristics of the Templars, and it's said that the wealth and secrets of the Templars were passed down and over to the elites, what we refer to as the Illuminati today. It's no coincidence that our current modern-day banking system was modeled after theirs. The Templars were the practitioners of black magic that became the foundation of many secret societies today, and we cannot understand the plots and schemes of the devil without understanding the groups and orders that he established among the ages. We, of course, will never know all of the secrets, but we can have an understanding so that we are not overtaken by their lies. Before we jump into the history of the more modern religions, we need to understand how they all got here in the first place. What we see with the Templars and the Church was the break between white magic and black magic. The Church being the white magic, and the Templars being the black magic. All the same goals, but the white magic did not approve of the black magic's method. So the black magic went underground and formed secret societies. They were no longer sworn monks like the Templars in public. They established themselves as society, becoming businessmen and scholars, thrusting themselves into the public world. But in secret, they pledged allegiance to dark black magic powers, and this is why they were secret societies. They hid from the Church. And if I did not give you a foundation of the Templars, the information following them would be incomplete. This series was made to inform you. The truth of the Bible and the gospel needed to be laid out first. But now we are moving into the lies of the enemy, and that's where all the other religions lie within. When we look at all the other religions and other lies, you almost always see the influence of these secret societies. So if I do not give you the background on them, many things may go past you. I want you informed and knowledgeable so that we weaken the hold of the devil, because he wants you blind, ignorant, and stupid. The other major part of the Templars has to do with the Holy Grail, but I cannot go into that without setting the stage. Freemasonry also needs to be understood, but I can't go into that without you understanding the Templars. They are the basis of understanding, the start of the secret societies, and if you want to understand where this world is heading, understanding the secret societies will assist you greatly. Through the Bible, we know where the world is headed. We understand the conflict, we understand the phases and the trumpets and bowl judgments that will be poured out. We understand the ending with the millennial kingdom. But one thing we do not understand is the enemy side of the story. And if we never look to what they have done throughout history in the darkness, we will be overtaken like many of us have been since birth. They have established great systems of communication and infrastructure, massive economic and political orders, religious structures that dominate the world. And without much of an understanding of the past, much of this history can go by the majority of us. The thing is that they write about these things. They do not completely hide their secrets. They just place them in books and then deter us from reading them. Why do you think the saying is that if you want to tell a secret, put it in a book? I'm not divulging some great information that the masses have not been told. I'm not a whistleblower. I've never been a part of any of these organizations. I've just been a student for many years, reading many books, reading many sources, and I now am trying to teach all the things that I've read and learned so that others have a strong view of the real world and not the fake one that we have been led to believe in. All the roots of the secret societies start here, when they came out into the public eye and began recruiting with the Templars. All the infrastructure of the secret societies, the wealth, the occult powers, they can all be traced back to the Templars. And the thing is that many of us probably never even heard of them, or what we have heard is not more than their names. As we rush towards these end times, we are entering their world that they have been creating in the dark. We cannot escape it, but knowledge and understanding will keep our hearts and our minds protected from lies and schemes, and that's the purpose of the History of Religion series.
That's a rank of my profession. You don't know nothing about that.
Okay, can we get a close-up on that area?
You don't know nothing about
What
that.
is the profession?
Yeah, which profession are we talking about?
Just look at it.
Is it a legal profession?
Of course it's legal. It's a rank of my profession.
I'm trying to read it.
Okay.
It's too many diamonds.
Yeah, that's too bright.
Oh,
That's too bright. Well, anyway.
Oh, Mason, are you a Mason?
Of course I am.
Okay. That's a secret ceremony.
Well, you might as well put your pinky out when you drink the drink.
Of course I am.
Put your pinky out.
You're involved in the secret ceremonies with the
Stop it.
candles and the...
Everyone
wears...
Anyway, the Clippers. The Clippers.
But that is impressive, Mr. O'Neill.
I don't have a gym.
Anyway, so the Clippers.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Those he doesn't wear.
Those he doesn't wear. The Clippers.
Yeah.
As I was blinded by success.
It's the world's most well-known secret society. Rich with symbols and ritual, it's a source of legends. Welcome to the world of Freemasonry. True or false, the Masons are a secret society.
No, that's false.
UCLA history professor Margaret Jacob is one of the world's leading experts on Freemasonry. True or false, Freemasonry is a religion.
No, it's false.
True or false, Masons were behind the American Revolution.
False. False, false.
Okay, but what about on the dollar bill? The eye and the pyramid?
Yeah.
I mean, that's Masonic, right?
No, everybody says it's Masonic. In fact, it's a commonplace in the 18th century, that particular set of symbols.
True. Freemasons laid the cornerstone of America. Well, at least some of its most iconic structures. So what is Freemasonry? Simply put, it's the world's oldest and largest fraternity.
Even while blindfolded, try to concentrate on what you are asked, what is said to you, and what is happening around you. Everything will be explained to you in later sections of the degree.
When a candidate comes in through the door, he's blindfolded because symbolically he's in a state of darkness, because Masonry is all about moving from darkness into Masonic light.
That it's a fact.
In my last video, I discussed breaking out of the matrix. This is something that must be done today. Come out of the strong delusion. When waking up, you'll find that there are so many things that need to be discussed and relearned. But the thing is that, in order to proceed in understanding many of these topics that have been concealed from us, we must understand a very big subject. Now, this topic is something that needs attention, but unfortunately, it is very hard to break down in fullness unless you are someone that has been exposed to their secrets and then has come out from them and that has chosen to risk your life in exposing them. It's also very hard to learn because of the amount of disinformation and lies that are told. Like recently, I went through a book that was covering this topic, but it was filled with so many small lies and false statements, it was very hard to read. This topic is also very hard to tackle because of the structure of the organization and the way they reveal their information and or secrets. There are degrees and levels within the organization, and you will find that personally, when those that will tell you that certain information is not true, they are saying this only because they are not initiated in that degree that gives them that access to the full understanding, or they are just trying to keep you from the truth. They are lying to you. Either way, because they are so strong in concealing the secrets and the truth, this is why we only know what they want us to know. Again, it's very hard breaking this group down. I am not a Mason, and I have never been one. No one in my family has ever been one, and I do not know anyone personally that can provide me with any additional knowledge that I could use. But in the end, it does not matter, because they still need to be discussed. You cannot live in this world and understand anything about the Matrix or the secret world that is hidden from the masses without understanding this organization. And in order to go over other topics, we must cover this one. You must understand what Freemasonry is. So we're going to tackle it now. Let's begin. Freemasonry is really one of the most misunderstood organizations. It appears on the surface to most Masons and non-Masons alike to be a friendly, fraternal organization, which meets the fellowship. Their organization, including the Shriners, are responsible for public good and many charities. If you ask the majority about Freemasonry, most people will tell you that they have heard of them, but they can't tell you much more than that they are a secret society and that many US presidents were a part of them. That is pretty much the extent of the mass population's knowledge of this group. They know they exist, but they don't know why. They may have watched documentaries on the History Channel, but those documentaries only give a bunch of half-truths and make general accusations that they never prove to be true, so it builds no conviction either way. But within an organization that has such a long history, that so many notable people throughout history from all aspects of life are claimed to be members of, this should be a subject that the majority of the world understands, especially since they have so much influence over our daily modern lives. What an actual Freemason might tell you about the organization is that Freemasonry is a fellowship of men, and men alone, who are bound by oaths to a method of self-betterment. The method centers on rituals performed in isolation from the outside world, in which symbols stand for moral qualities. They will be proud to tell you and emphasize that they are brothers of an organization that boasts members such as George Washington and no fewer than 14 other presidents of the United States, at least 5 kings of England, Benjamin Franklin, Winston Churchill, Paul Revere, Buzz Aldrin, Wolfgang Mozart, golfing legend Arnold Palmer, entertainer Harry Houdini, business titans like Henry Ford and Walt Disney, singer Nat King Cole, boxer Sugar Ray Robinson, rapper Jay-Z, and basketball great Shaquille O'Neal. And listen, that's a very small list that I'm giving you. These are just some of the names that have shared and not concealed their membership to this organization. But it can easily be seen that many at the top of their game and at the highest levels of our modern day society are a part of this organization. But that doesn't mean that everyone at the top are Masons. Well, today, the way this world is though, that statement is getting harder and harder to validate. The members of Freemasonry are in a very diverse range from the likes of tradesmen, merchants, lawyers, actors, Jews, Africans, and those that have descended from the Atlantic slave trade. Today, there are approximately 6 million Freemasons around the world, with 1.1 million Freemasons in the United States and 400,000 in Britain. It's said in the past the numbers were much greater. But again, the average person knows very little about them. And it's ironic too, because the activities that go on in private behind the doors of their lodges have helped spread many of the values many people of this world today associate with modern public life. Values like living by a code of religious and racial tolerance, democracy, global politics, and equality. On another note, Masons have helped shape things like imperialism and global war, the building and breaking of states and nations, dictatorships, and religious fanaticism. If you speak to a Mason about it, they may tell you that we are not a secret society. We are a society with secrets. And that's true, because honestly, how can an organization this large with so many notable members ever be a secret? It's not that they are secret. It's just that what they believe in and are purposed with is concealed and hidden. That's the secret. So let's get past the introduction of them and go into who they are. Let me cover this first. This may surprise many people because, for the majority, Freemasonry is looked at as an organization, as a secret society. But it is in fact a religion. I will prove this later. This is why it is in the History of Religion series. Freemasonry goes back to the mystery religions of ancient Babylon. You see, the History of Religion series stopped at the last episode, part 69, because in order to discuss the other lies of this world, Freemasonry needed to be broken down. And Father did not give me the words to complete the task, so I did not attempt at the time. But it really is time to bring some clarity around this religion/organization. Now, history likes to claim that Freemasonry came into existence in the early 18th century, around the year 1717. I believe that's the claim. But this is not correct. Freemasonry is the ancient mystery religion that has been passed down over centuries since ancient Babylon, where we find Nimrod and Tammuz. I covered this in part 1. This knowledge didn't go away for thousands of years and come back in the 18th century. No. To understand better, let's go back to part 66 of this series. This is when we spoke about the Knights Templar. They were also known as the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, and also known as the Order of Solomon's Temple. The Knights Templar, or simply the Templars, were a Catholic military order founded in 1119. They were headquartered on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem through 1128. When they came back to Rome, they amassed untold power given by the Pope. They were claimed guardians and protectors of the Holy Grail. These are two subjects I covered in detail in parts 66 and 67. If you have not watched these episodes, you should go back and review that information. The Templars were presented in history as Christian soldiers who fought for the glory of Christ. But the truth is that there was a very dark side to them that was done in secret. They were sorcerers, magicians, and alchemists. Many people that lived during their time shunned them, believing them to be in league with unclean powers. They were the beginning of the known black magic-based organizations that were brought to the open. Although individual knights were bound to a vow of poverty, this did not prevent the order from amassing wealth, and on an unprecedented scale. The temple received in abundance, but as a matter of strict policy, it never gave. During the next 100 years, the Templars became a power with international influence. They were constantly engaged in high-level diplomacy among nobles and monarchs throughout the Western world and the Holy Land. So what happened to them? In the early 14th century, the French king, King Philip, moved against the Templars. He branded them as devil worshippers. At dawn on Friday, October the 13th, 1307, all Templars in France were to be seized and placed under arrest by the king's men, their common houses placed under royal sequestration, their goods confiscated. It was on this day, October 13th, that the Templars were burned alive, and this is where we get the famous Friday the 13th from. Now, it is said that not all Templars were killed during this Friday the 13th seizure. There is persuasive evidence that there was some sort of organized flight by a particular group of knights, virtually all of whom were in some way connected with the order's treasurer. The treasure of the temple, together with almost all of his documents and records, disappeared. The papal bulls that King Philip sent dissolving the Templars was never proclaimed in Scotland, and therefore the order was never technically dissolved in Scotland. Many English and French Templars found a Scottish refuge, but they were no longer in power in the open. You see, this information is important to know, because this is where we see the formation of Freemasonry. Many Freemasons claim the Templars to be the organization's predecessors. Certain Masonic rites or observances claimed direct lineal descent from the Templar order, as well as authorized custody of its arcane secrets. Certain Masonic lodges have adopted the grade of Templar, as well as rituals and appellations supposedly descended from the original order. Follow and understand this. The black magic and secrets of the Templar went underground after the dissolution of the Templars by King Philip, and they reorganized over 4 centuries, passing down their knowledge, later coming back out of the shadows with Scottish Rite Freemasonry. And this is a good starting point to understand them from. Now, let's talk about their beliefs and beginnings. Just like with the Templars, Solomon's Temple is very important to Freemasonry. Let's go back to part 6 of the series. Now, many of us who have read our Bibles know of King Solomon, son of King David. We know the history of him according to the Bible. But the other side, who are actually enemies of the Bible, they have a very different view on Solomon. Believers in the Bible see major mistakes done by Solomon that had consequences for all of Israel. But among the other nations, King Solomon is praised and made no mistakes. Among the Eastern nations, King Solomon is esteemed as a great magician who had great power over the spirit world. It was said and claimed that he gained his power from Satan, who gave him a ring of power with his symbol on the ring. This symbol is known as the Seal of Solomon, also known as the Star of David. I cover this on part 3 of my symbol series. The Seal of Solomon is a hexagram and hides complex meanings, but it is a symbol highly used in witchcraft. The symbol was supposedly used on Solomon's ring and gave him the power to understand and communicate with animals, and to conjure up spirits to do his bidding. Kabbalists and alchemists are very fond of this symbol. It's also hidden on the US dollar. It's not a symbol of Elohim, the God of the Bible. The point of this knowledge is that from Solomon's mistake, the glory of ancient Israel went downhill, and Lucifer used Solomon's disobedience in creating and establishing his doctrine for future worship of him by his own name. Let me explain where Solomon fits in. In reference to Freemasonry, according to the Freemason dictionary, the Temple of Solomon plays a very important part. It is said in Freemasonry that Solomon, Huram, king of Tyre, and Hiram Abif presided as Grand Masters over the lodges which they established. It's said the symbolic degrees were instituted and the systems of initiation were invented, and from that period to the present, Freemasonry has passed them down. It's said that almost all the symbolism of Freemasonry rests upon or is derived from the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. Each Masonic lodge is and must be a symbol of the Jewish temple. Each master in the chair represents King Solomon, and every Freemason is a personation of the Jews who worked on the temple. It's important to understand that Satan wants to be like Elohim, so he must use the things of Elohim but pervert them. This is why there will be an Antichrist. I really hope it starts connecting that Satan's primary goal is to pervert the things of Elohim. He's not just making up his own doctrine, but it must be a perversion of Elohim's, the opposite of it. This is why the building of the third temple is so important to this new occult age. This is a goal of Freemasonry, and the events transpiring today are being orchestrated by these men within this structure of power. Freemasonry and the occult all use Solomon as a symbol for their rebellion, particularly because of how great and important Solomon was, and what he did. This history is very important to understand. Again, like I said earlier, Freemasonry is not just an organization, it's a religion. The goal of the religion of Freemasonry is to spread the light of Freemasonry to the world. I will explain deeper just exactly what that light is, but let me define it based on Albert Mackey's Masonic Dictionary. He writes this about light. Light is an important word in the Masonic system. It conveys a far more recondite meaning than it is believed to possess by the generality of readers. It is in fact the first of all the symbols presented to the neophyte, and continues to be presented to him in various modifications throughout all his future progress in his Masonic career. It does not simply mean, as might be supposed, truth or Sodom, but it contains within itself a far more abstruse, meaning difficult to understand, allusion to the very essence of speculative Freemasonry, and embraces within its capacious signification all the other symbols of the order. Freemasons are emphatically called the Sons of Light, because they are, or at least are entitled to be, in possession of the true meaning of the symbol, while the profane or uninitiated who have not received this knowledge are, by a parody of expression, said to be in darkness. Okay, so he simply said that what we may know to be light isn't what they are referring to. And from the time a new member becomes a Mason, he is in possession of the light. And as he goes through degrees, he goes through a deeper understanding of what this light is. It is the Mason's job to spread this light, and those not Masons are in darkness. So hold that thought, because we're going to get deeper. Now, there are many books that provide information about Freemasonry, But I believe in understanding their beliefs, there is no better book to start from than from 33rd degree Freemasons Albert Pike's. Albert Pike is the only Confederate military officer or figure to be honored with a statue in Washington, D.C. Albert Pike wrote an 861-page volume of lectures on the esoteric roots of Freemasonry, specifically the 32-degree Scottish Rite. The book is called Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, or simply Morals and Dogma. It is a book of esoteric philosophy published by the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree Scottish Rite, which was first published in 1872. Until 1964, this book was given to every Mason completing the 14th degree in the southern jurisdiction of the U.S. Scottish Rite Freemasons. There are 32 chapters, each discussing the philosophic symbology of a degree of Freemasonry in exhaustive detail. It's important to understand that though it discusses Masonic rituals at length, it is written so as not to reveal the Masonic secrets. It's written very confusingly, and you can feel the evil coming off the pages. Ritual motions and objects are named and elaborated upon, but not described. It is not a book I recommend reading. Do not buy this book. In some older editions, the title page of the book declares in large, bold letters, "Esoteric book for Scottish Rite use only, to be returned upon withdrawal or death of recipient." Yeah, it's completely evil. But in the book, it does bring a lot of clarity about Freemasonry and what they believe. There is a lot of things that is mentioned in this book that I will bring to the light. Now again, please note, as we read, he explains things to keep most of their secrets and mysteries concealed. So do not get caught up in understanding every word. Remember, it's not for you to. Let's get to it. So I'm going to first jump to the end of the book to prove a point I made earlier in reference to Freemasonry deriving from the Templars. On page 820, when discussing the 31st degree, the book says, "The end of the drama is well known, and how Jacques de Molay and his fellows perished in the flames. But before his execution, the chief of the doomed order organized and instituted what afterward came to be called the Occult, Hermetic, or Scottish Masonry. In the gloom of his prison, the Grand Master created 4 metropolitan lodges, at Naples for the east, at Edinburgh for the west, at Stockholm for the north, and at Paris for the south." Page 821. The order disappeared at once. Its estates and wealth were confiscated, and it seemed to have ceased to exist. Nevertheless, it lived under other names and governed by unknown chiefs, revealing itself only to those who, in passing through a series of degrees, had proven themselves worthy to be entrusted with the dangerous secret. The initiates, in fact, thought in the 18th century that their time had arrived, some to found a new hierarchy, others to overturn all authority, and to press down all the summits of the social order under the levels of equality. You see, this clearly tells that Freemasonry is just a rebranding of the Templars. Now, it's important to know that in order to be a Freemason, you must believe in God. You just can't be an atheist and become a Mason. Now, whoever you want to call him and believe in, they don't care. But you just must have a belief in a God. You must believe in a supreme being that's over you. On page 11, when discussing the first degree, the book says, "The Holy Bible, square, and compasses are not only styled the great lights in Masonry, but they are also technically called the furniture of the lodge. And, as you have seen, it is held that there is no lodge without them. This has sometimes been made a pretext for excluding Jews from our lodges, because they cannot regard the New Testament as a holy book. The Bible is an indispensable part of the furniture of a Christian lodge, only because it is the sacred book of the Christian religion. The Hebrew Pentateuch, the Torah, in a Hebrew lodge, and the Quran, in a Mohammedan one, belong on the altar, and one of these, and the square and compass, properly understood, are the great lights by which a Mason must walk and work." So, as we can see, religion is a huge part of this, obviously, because they're taking the major faiths and using their books as furniture of the lodge. But you can see that they already have embraced the one world religion. You must have a belief in God. As we keep going, we will understand why. There are so many points I could bring up from this book. Let's go back to my earlier point about Freemasonry going back to the ancient mystery religions. Like I said earlier, Freemasonry is just a rebranding of the ancient mystery religions. On page 23, when discussing the second degree, the book says, "Though Masonry is identical with the ancient mysteries, it is so only in this qualified sense, that it presents but an imperfect image of their brilliancy, the ruins only of their grandeur, and a system that has experienced progressive alterations, the fruits of social events, political circumstances, and the ambitious imbecility of its improvers. After leaving Egypt, the mysteries were modified by the habits of the different nations among whom they were introduced, and especially by the religious systems of the countries into which they were transplanted. To maintain the established government, laws, and religion was the obligation of the initiate everywhere, and everywhere they were heritage of the priest, who were nowhere willing to make the common people co-proprietors with themselves of philosophical truth. Again, it's just a rebranding of the ancient mystery religions. Like I said earlier, Freemasonry is not just an organization, but it is a religion.
True or false, Freemasonry is a religion.
No, it's false.
On page 213, in discussing the 13th degree, the book explains, every Masonic lodge is a temple of religion, and its teachings are instruction in religion. That's very plain. This point is concealed from the general public, who think of it only as a secular organization. He explains it more here. Going on page 219, discussing the 14th degree, the book explains, much of the Masonic secret manifests itself, without speech revealing it to him who even partially comprehends all the degrees in proportion as he receives them, and particularly to those who advance to the highest degrees of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. That rite raises a corner of the veil, even in the degree of apprentice, for it there declares that Masonry is a worship. You see, Masonry is a form of worship. It's really so deep. In the book, it also explains what the whole goal or end result is for them. On page 274, discussing the 17th degree, the book explains, behold the object, the end, the result of the great speculations and logomachies of antiquity, the ultimate annihilation of evil, a restoration of man to his first estate, by a Redeemer, a Messiah, a Christos, the incarnate word, reason, or power of deity. Wow, we're really getting warm. So their object, or the end game for them, is the annihilation of evil and restoration of man by a Messiah figure. It gives more detail on page 287 on the 18th degree. You see, my brother, what is the meaning of Masonic light? You see why the east of the lodge, where the initial letter of the name of the deity overhangs the master, is the place of light. Light, as contradistinguished from darkness, is good, as contradistinguished from evil. And it is that light, the true knowledge of deity, the eternal good, for which Masons in all ages have sought. Still, Masonry marches steadily onward toward that light that shines in the great distance. The light of that day when evil, overcome and vanquished, shall fade away and disappear forever, and life and light be the one law of the universe and its eternal harmony. The degree of Rose teaches three things: the unity, immutability, and goodness of God, the immortality of the soul, and the ultimate defeat and extinction of evil and wrong and sorrow by a Redeemer or Messiah yet to come, if he has not already appeared. Do you know what their ultimate defeat and extinction of evil is? To really answer that question, we need to clearly understand the God that they worship. Now, the book makes many references to the pagan gods and goddesses, but there are very clear statements made in the book that can tell you all that you need to know about Freemasonry. On page 321, discussing the 19th degree, they reveal who their God is. The apocalypse is, to those who receive the 19th degree, the apotheosis of that sublime faith, which aspires to God alone, and despises all the pomps and works of Lucifer. Lucifer, the light bearer. Strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, the son of the morning. Is it he who bears the light, and with its splendors, intolerable blinds feeble, sensual, or selfish souls? Doubt it not. I rebuke that in the name of Yeshua. For traditions are full of divine revelations and inspirations, and inspiration is not of one age, nor of one creed. Plato and Philo also were inspired. Okay, there we have it. Lucifer is their God, and they are spreading his light to the world. That's why Lucifer means light bearer. They are help bearing his light. The ultimate defeat and extinction of evil is going back to Lucifer's whole agenda of being like the Most High and ascending to his heights. They believe that the true God of the Bible is evil, and their mission is to remove his influence from this world. If you follow this History of Religion series from part 1, when we spoke about paganism, this goes back to that information. It also goes back to part 5, when we spoke about knowing our enemy. What we know is that this religion of Freemasonry is charged with spreading the light of Lucifer to the world. On page 328, when discussing the 20th degree, the book explains, the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Masonry has now become what Masonry at first was meant to be, a teacher of great truths, inspired by an upright and enlightened reason, a firm and constant wisdom, and an affectionate and liberal philanthropy. And page 817, discussing the 30th degree, explains, all that will become the heritage of the temple the world will soon come to us for its sovereigns and pontiffs. We shall constitute the equilibrium of the universe and be rulers over the masters of the world. This is their plan. And when looking at the world the way it is now, from the way it was in 1872, when this book was made, it's very easy to see that their goal is being realized. And that is a great deal of background information on what Freemasonry is, and what and who they believe in. They are the priests of this world that are directing it to a new world order. This topic is overwhelming, because there are so many other points to cover. I will let Father lead me on where to go with it next. But if I impress anything upon you, I want you to know never to trust a Mason. Let me explain why. Just by the fact that they are a Mason means that they are able to keep secrets and are bound to them. They can lie to your face and never feel a way about it. They have taken oaths that supersede their family and obligation to our Father in heaven. And you should know this if you have a father, a husband, an uncle, a friend that is a Freemason. Especially if you have a pastor that is a Freemason. And you will find that this is a huge occurrence in the black community. But I don't want to jump too fast. If your pastor is a Freemason, or you see a lot of Freemason symbols on license plates in your church parking lot, run from that church. There is a lot more to unveil, but most of it cannot be understood without understanding this topic first. When discussing this topic, Isaiah chapter 5 immediately comes to mind, like I'm sure it does with many of you. Woe to those who call evil good, and good evil, who put darkness for light, and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet, and sweet for bitter. That's Isaiah chapter 5 verse 20. These men are pushing darkness to the world by calling it light. Woe to them. They believe that they are agents of light, though they are truly agents of darkness. Woe to them. The fact and truth is that they are on the opposite side of the battlefield, and because their secrets are so concealed, and many of us just walk in ignorance of the world that we live in, many of us have no idea of it at all. You see, the Bible has prepared us for this, though, and told us that this is exactly what Satan will do. The Apostle Paul warned us in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 14 and 15. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. So what is Freemasonry? It is an organized religion tasked with the goal of spreading the light of Lucifer to the world. It desires to rebuild Solomon's temple and save humanity through their Messiah. It is a religion masked and covered by secrets and charity. They are agents of darkness masquerading as agents of light. This part of the world has been hidden from us, and they have been covering up their intentions on bringing about their new world order and their false Messiah. And those that are following the lies of this world and moving in its direction are being led by them. It's important that you wake up and make sure you are not being led and steered by darkness. You must worship our Father in heaven in spirit and in truth, and reject the lies and the blasphemy. Knowledge is power, and that's why they have hidden themselves in the shadows. It keeps all of those who cannot see them without power. The goal of this ministry is to reverse this and keep the church ready for our Messiah's coming. Please stay ready and awake. Remember John's warning in his first epistle, chapter 4, verse 1. He says, Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits whether they are of Elohim, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. After watching this, I'm sure you can see just how true and powerful that guidance is. Live through that warning and rest on our Father's word and live in his truth, holding on to righteousness and being a living witness and testimony of our Father in heaven. Believe fully in Yeshua HaMashiach and reject the false Messiah that is preparing to come. The time is absolutely now to live in the truth, but it is your choice. Who will you choose? Make the right decision and submit your life to Yeshua right now and be ready for him. Be blessed. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please make sure to like this and share it with others. If you have not already done so, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. Elohim willing, I upload every Friday. Don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. I want to thank everyone for all of the support of this ministry. I truly appreciate the prayers and support. All the messages of love and understanding are overwhelming, and they truly bless me. As always, I want to thank all those who donate to this channel. Your donations are a sincere blessing to this ministry. I'm extremely appreciative for your love, offerings, and support. Thank you. Okay, everyone. Thanks again for watching. I love you all.